I'm just gonna let this intro play, because this has got to be one of the best intros ever. God, it's so good. I love how it looks like both The Simpsons and Nightmare Before Christmas at the same time, where you get little previews of the people and places you'll see, and the intro is like a roguelike. It's different every time. The graffiti, the cameos, Dr. Frankenstein's pocket protector all change, and the Frankenstein sequence really straps you down for the setup before the punchline of the joke, which is different every time. Yeah! It's so good! This is such a good intro! In like 30 seconds, your mood is right where it needs to be! You don't need me to tell you that Mewgenics is good, but I do need the money I'll make from telling you Mewgenics is good. Mewgenics is good. But how could it not be? This is a 14-year-long labor of love by a celebrity indie developer who is often associated with the very invention of the concept of artsy-fartsy personal authorial games in general. Newgrounds and its associated stars like Edmund McMillan were doing this stuff years before indie games was a popular term, years before Steam, years before the movie, and somewhere in that history of Newgrounds is a massively underappreciated portion of the history of all the wider world of game design too. Of how technology used to shock teenagers' parents ended up becoming a springboard for gaming in general to evolve into something more serious and self-aware and earnest that also ended up getting corrupted and co-opted into the mainstream mobile gaming slot machine. Mewgenics is the ultimate form of that style, and the latest chapter of that story, with all the good and the bad that means. As nasty and mean as the Newgrounds style often gets, I personally associate the style with positivity. It was very important for a lot of us developing media creation skills when we were teenagers, myself included, and unlike on 4chan, we never found out that Jeffrey Epstein was having conversations with the founder of Newgrounds. So Mewgenics feels, to me, like the perfection of an existing style that I do have some kind of personal connection with. And it also really does feel like it took a lot of time and passion to make. Usually when games go through these ridiculously long dev cycles like that, it usually means something really bad happened behind the scenes. But Mewgenics was always intended to be an overcomplicated, overambitious magnum opus to take a long time over a long period of stability anyway. However, something bad did end up happening for a few of those years, but not as catastrophic as the other examples I can think of. As far as its contemporaries in the genre of development hell games go, I don't think we can say there's ever been another game out there like this where it took over a decade to make. You can feel that level of dedication in the final product, but maybe this is the one case where it feels like all that extended time might have actually been a good thing? I mean, games are only like 60 years old. How many candidates can there even be? Alright, so I had to make this video quick. Apparently it takes like 100 hours to complete the story, and I did not have that kind of time, thus I cannot comment on whether or not it might not be as fun if you grind through 100 hours of this in 1 month, but in the amount of time I have had to give it, Mewgenics has absolutely given me enough pleasure in return to fill the time we have here. Mewgenics is a turn-based RPG strategy first, and a life sim management game second. The basic idea is that you're a cat breeder who makes your cats go on dangerous Final Fantasy Tactics adventures so that they can level up and gain stats, so they can mate and make kitties with high stats who go on successively more dangerous Final Fantasy Tactics adventures again and again and again for cyclical dopamine loop psychological game design reasons first, and story narrative reasons second. Story narrative reasons that I still haven't fully uncovered yet, but I am absolutely along for what a wildly entertaining ride this has been so far. Truth is, it took a couple days for me to fall in love with this game because the narrative starts so lightweight that it was hard to feel like I had real goals or objectives to work for in the early game. But what started out as an absence of a story is now just feeling like a more cryptic or metaphorical story, and that's fine. Satisfying goals and objectives are coming in alongside darkly humorous, morbid story revelations given by the music more than the characters, which is actually awesome. Like, one of the narrative mysteries is trying to figure out exactly who or what you are playing as and what the adventures are. When you're playing the turn-based RPG strategy part of the game, it's like you're playing more from the perspective of the cats. They're magical, they're powerful, they think up genius strategy moves. But when you're playing the life sim management part of the game, they're not casting magic spells, they're just kinda catting around like their brains are operating on animal instinct instead of genius strategy. It did take me a few days to fall in love with this game, but the gameplay is where it snagged me real hard. Over the past couple years, I've turned into a real big fan of turn-based strategy, and I swear that Mewgenics is doing turn-based strategy really, really good. I think the base of the soup here is Final Fantasy Tactics, but with lessons learned from the next 25 years of hits like Into the Breach and those newfangled modern Fire Emblems. But in the early game, Mewgenics handles its complexity with elegance. It'll throw you together a fun Final Fantasy Tactics battle in just like 1 or 2 clicks compared to the mess of menus of the original games. And somehow it feels less bloated than its predecessors, even though it's not. The UI is so clean, there is a lot of effective iconography going on, where the UI tries to clearly explain complicated gameplay situations without having to use big numbers or tiny text to do it. Despite the oddball aesthetics, this is not really an experimental oddball game. Once I figured out what was going on, I figured out that this is pretty much a conventional turn-based tactics game. But a couple arbitrary rules highly reward aggressiveness and highly punish turtling, and that really pushes you into using the oddball tactics that are on offer. However, Mewgenics also is about as complicated and messy as its contemporaries, and the damn fine icon art only works up to a certain point. There's a lot of little modifiers and interactions and items that all change the rules in a bunch of little ways, and doing well at the game means keeping track of a lot of small variables to pass a lot of short-term memory tests. The latter stages of most runs will sometimes throw so many complicated frames of exploding symbols at you from some temporary unexpected effects that all disappear so fast that an optional text log explaining what just happened would still be appreciated. Speaking of options that do exist, I recommend turning on the double-click attacks for empty tiles to reduce accidental misclicks, and setting breeding animations to both, because the safe ones are very funny jokes to see every once in a while that won't get old fast. The decision-making dynamics are like Binding of Isaac, where the player choices are more dense than they are wide. You're constantly being pulled in 2 or 3 directions of equal weight. High-risk, high-reward decisions that you can't take back and can't easily save come around, though I do encourage giving it a try. That density, rather than a scattering of player choices, is seen by the examples of the terrain effects, which are remarkably sparse for how decisive they're going to be. We got grass, we got water, and there's toxic slime, sometimes there's glass. I think there's only going to be like 4 or 5, maybe 6 terrains for the whole game, but most of the time you're dealing with only 2 very consequential types. That grass increases dodge chances by 50%, in most other games it would be a thick forest. This is the whole game's style. Those decisions that need to get made will feel very manageable for how crazily complicated the AI death machines are moving, and how clever you can be about sabotaging them. The decision-making process might sound something like this. Alright, we got 4 boomers and 2 poopies. The boomers are going to blast the poopies at the orthogonal, so I'll stay on the diagonals, but it looks like I should be keeping 1 square distance to clear the fart gas. I don't know how much of a sucker I am for toilet humor, but I am a sucker for game developer humor. Something about this stuff really is clicking with me. I think the point of the joke I'm getting is less about the poop and the farts being there at all, so much as it is about them being in a highly tactical and technical context. The game's full of mechanical humor that can't be told like traditional jokes. The decisions you're making will sound like jokes, the intro cutscene is a joke, the way the music works is a joke, the game mechanics are so very often pretty good funny jokes. Like, I love the night piece. It makes you jump in an L shape, because of course, what else would a night piece do? That's what they do! And always having a small handful of high-value decisions to be making all the time compresses and expands time. Terrifying. There is a terrifying phenomenon of time dilation going on here. Whether I can only play for a lunch break or a few hours, the amount of time I end up spending will always end up feeling really natural, like it's not being wasted. Even though this damn guy wasted one of my 3-hour runs in like 2 minutes. But the whole process of building a team and getting the game started blitzes by. The total percentage of time I'm spending playing the actual game and not the menus here is so much higher than FFT. And once the ball's rolling, I can spend 4 whole hours on just 1 run from how much time I'll be thinking through every turn, or I'll spend just 30 minutes thinking through 1 battle that I can shove into a lunch break that's still gonna feel easy to pull myself away from when I've got more important things to do. At the end of every match, a party member levels up, and it is a real addictive temptation to immediately test out your new moves on the next battle. But then again, that very same sense of getting a big reward also feels like a nice bookmark to be ending your session at. Whether you have 4 hours or 30 minutes, your sessions feel like they have a satisfying beginning, middle, and end. No matter how much time you have to spend, it's like you will get enough time to really think through every turn, and at some point, feel like that big brain Napoleon strategy genius you wanna feel like. And I wonder if the square grids help out with that. How you only really have two angles of approach to worry about. So I want to talk a bit here about tabletop strategy gaming history or theory, and how Mewgenics is probably further down the video gaming family tree and closer to chess, actually, than a lot of the modern Weisritzian-derived Kriegspiel game systems, simply and only because it uses a square grid. This isn't really a value judgment, just an explanation behind how some nerds can talk your face off about why hexagons are the bestagons. Basically, in square grid strategy games, the optimal strategies usually just boil down to filling the board with as many cheap units as possible, because being able to corner one strong unit with two weak units scales up to mean that mobility and positioning are much more valuable than strength points. Hexes, or entirely non-linear movement systems, give players more options to avoid this kind of literal gridlock situation. And though Mewgenics strategy can get hilariously convoluted, I did notice that I almost always did better and was worrying less, and therefore had to think less strategically, and therefore feel less satisfied from my victories, if I was using a playstyle more about clogging up the map with superior numbers, rather than actually thinking long and hard about how to be a big brain Napoleon genius going up against superior numbers. And back to the time dilation, how so much time can seem to pass so quickly while thinking through those high-value decisions. That is absolutely the fault of the soundtrack, which has these very predictable, meditative, metronomic beats that cycle to the pacing of strategic thinking like a ticking clock in a library. The background music is just great music to be doing some thinking to, and the genres of music it explores are beautifully diverse. We got punk rock. We got surf rock. We got singing country cowboy music. And we got cowboy bebop music. They're nice, but really just particularly nice, catchy, soothing background melodies, until you get to the bosses, where a sacred game design rule will be consciously broken to excellent effect.
A couple slices of bread, stuff a rat in the middle. If you're not too finicky, I'll make a fricassee for you and me, babe. Eating rats, yeah.
A lot of game developers have said that game developers are not supposed to use highly distracting vocals for their game background music, unless you're Platinum Games or something. It usually doesn't work. Lyrics get repetitive after a couple hours, they can distract you from concentrating on the gameplay, but not here they don't. No! In Mewgenics, somehow all of that stuff that's bad about highly distracting music lyrics in video games is a good thing. Every single track of the boss music is so good by itself that hearing the music is your reward for getting to the end of a stage. Over the stages, you'll be hearing the wordless melodies of the music loop over and over again for tens of minutes, so by the time you're hearing another person's voice get added to that, your own internal thinking voice has already adjusted to the rhythms going on. And earning the lyrics to a melody you've been struggling to feels like a tease that's finally paying off with satisfaction. It becomes part of the fun of the fight. It's such good songwriting that interpreting the lyrics at the same time as you're interpreting the boss and developing your strategy, that just makes the bosses harder in a fun way that makes perfect sense for the kind of charm this game's going after. The lyrics will be about the bosses you're fighting, or about the world the game takes place in, so the lyrics work like flavor text or lore text. You have a motivation to actually listen to them all the way through. The English is very clear, they're not mumbling the words, they are not very cryptic or metaphorical lyrics either, so slowing down for a minute during the chaos of these big battles to enjoy the lyrics becomes a part of the very gameplay loop of enjoying the whole game. Getting to a boss to hear their music is like more than half of the motivation keeping me going here. The first time you fight any of these bosses is such a beautiful special experience. You can only learn the song and the tactics at the same time, for the first time once. but you sure won't hear them once. The songs are also designed to be earworms. They are designed to get stuck in your head forever and drive you crazy when you're not playing the games. So, the solution to that problem is to get better at the game and make it to the end of the next stage so that you can get a different song stuck in your head. And this is insane. For the developers to consciously use music to screw with you and reward you and annoy you in real life, all for the sake of the jokes, is such an obsessively, meticulously thought out design that this is a little scary to witness. How did they do this? How did they convince all these classy, international, award-winning musicians to make these masterpieces of songs about flushing poop down the drain? That juxtaposition, the juxtaposition between the song being about poop and the song also being a masterpiece, is why I think Mewgenics is actually very serious, artsy-fartsy, honest-to-God proof that games are art, even when the game is an immature, scatological grotesquerie. Well, actually, I don't know if it's immature. That might just be a skin-deep assumption. Maybe based on the stuff from 20 years ago, but I mean, this game has references to classic literature. You can tell it's trying to do the edgy humor stuff, but in a smart way, where they're trying not to hurt anyone. It expresses an impressive amount of learned lessons, particularly the importance of having a sense of humor when everything is just shit. The Newgrounds style has helped a lot of successful artists cope with and understand and grow up from trauma with the kind of help that having a sense of humor and the healthy, divine, sublime powers of creation can provide. Now, this is speculation only based on knowing way too much about a celebrity's character instead of their reality, but I wonder if the ideas that would become Mewgenics had their genesis around the time these scenes were filmed for Indie Game the Movie. Cats keep coming up. The stressed-out, hard-working Macmillan couple spend a few minutes of the movie dreaming about what kind of cats they want and what kind of happy, peaceful home they could fill up with those cats, and then there's the launch day fiascos, where Tommy Raffines is freaking out on launch day while Edmund is trying to distract himself and stay sane by cuddling up on the couch with his wife and watching Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. I think Mewgenics expresses a yearning for a cyclical and peaceful harmony of traditional suburban domestic life, lived with an opposite-gender spouse and a bunch of happy pets, but that vision is being cynically parodied through the perspective of someone who did go through the kind of bad shit in their early years that an adult mind would keep dwelling on forever. In Edmund Macmillan games, you're going to get an impression that child abuse happened, and that's horrible. But you're also going to get an impression that he is madly in love with his wife, and that's adorable. I think Mewgenics is a game that's given me an impression of how much the both of them love their cats. And I think that makes the game adorable. Mewgenics is a game broken up into two halves that reflect traditional gender norms. A female half where you play it like a dollhouse, buying and arranging furniture and cleaning the house up, when you're not slapping cute couples together to make them make cute kitties, and then you send those cute kitties onto magical Final Fantasy adventures for the male half of the game, where you're bringing back home a big sack of money and food at the end of a hard day. There's a sarcastic depiction of domestic bliss going on here. A parody of Eden, like an Adam and an Eve are existing in some kind of cyclical perpetuity of doing cute and fun things forever with a kind of superficial low-stakes conflict keeping things interesting forever. But this situation can't possibly be heavenly because of all the high-stakes suffering we see. Massive, shocking, truly distressing amounts of evil and suffering and misery and filth exist in this game's world, but it's all drawn with a smirk and a smile. The game is a reflection on domestic tranquility, as seen through the cynical but completely artistically valid Newgrounds lens, where childhood trauma gets coped with using art. In other words, Mewgenics is a Hieronymus Bosch Garden of Earthly Delights-like. The game is a work of art that addresses a lot of the evil of the real world, but in unrealistic and cartoony terms, and it also explores the good of an ideal heavenly world that can only ever exist in our heads. Both halves defining each other by just how much of a contrast there is between the two. I think what we are seeing, with all the poop and pee and misery and abuse in Macmillan games, is drawn unrealistically and cartoony, because that's the reflection of someone who did have to think very long and hard and seriously about that stuff for years, but had to do it in a way that wouldn't trigger realistic visual memories. That's more themes than story, and I haven't gotten to the end of the story yet. By the sound of things, it's going to take a damn long while, but I am expecting to be pretty impressed by the dark places this game's going to go and the sense of humor it's going to handle them with. Listen, here's an example. I had to visit my dying elderly mother in the hospice quite a few times over the past few months, and every time I had that gross-ass song about eating rats stuck in my head for the whole thing. I'm sitting there trying to be all sensitive and sweet and respectful and holding back a tear or two, but what was going on in my head at the same time was a complete failure by my brain to pick anything else for our background music for that situation, and I bet these guys would have thought that was hilarious, and exactly the kind of effect they were going for with this music and their sense of humor. Having a stupid song stuck in your head during a serious moment is ultimately harmless and hilarious and human, and it's just gonna make for some better memories when all of this is finally over than if I had Beethoven or something stuck in my head instead. This is about turning our bad times into good times to stay sane. And if that's the purpose of art and culture and entertainment, then Mewgenics is looking like one of the finest examples of the art form that we have. And if you like getting your kicks by discovering how much artistic meat there can be to chew on in unexpected places, I wanted to recommend the Gods and Monsters series by Curious Archive. For the past few years, I have been extremely fascinated by how religious history kind of turned into art history that kind of turned into pop culture history, even though they're all the same timeline, and this is a series about that. It's poetic and romantic writing about how the scariest monster designs of modern times are really repeating traditions that are centuries old. And I helped. When the Angels and Demons episode comes out soon, you'll hear me on an interview segment collaborating. That series is totally unique to Nebula, which is a creator-owned, creator-sponsored video service that is really full of big brainy fun right now. We got a series about boobs and politics, we got a series about devil's advocacy, we got the music critic Polyphonic doing an hour-long movie about weed music from the hippies to hip-hop. Lindsay Ellis is back making videos again, but now on Nebula, and Captain Disillusion is on Nebula now too. Nebula's been sponsoring some really great, high-quality, thoughtful, and just plain fun videos that I am enjoying these days as much as the rest of you. So by signing up, you'd not just be supporting some of the best video creators alive today, but you'll be getting access to all this ad-free cerebral fun too. If you want to watch these poetic mini-docs on gods and monsters, just go to nebula.tv/superbunnyhop or scan the QR code on the video and you'll get 50% off. It's just $30 a year, or $250 a month. And for those who really have money to spare, following either my link or this QR code can get you $200 off the Nebula Lifetime Plan, which gets you access to Nebula forever, and the warm fuzzy feeling of helping us all invest in bigger, better things. So thank you, Nebula, for sponsoring, thank you for watching, and thank you to Edmund McMillan and Tyler Galadriel for helping me turn some of my bad times into good times.